We wake up with pocket kings in the small blind. This is 1-2 no limit. A player late raises to 10. The button makes it 45 to go. I have about 275 behind. I could 4-bet here, or I could just go all in. And because I'm at a position in the small blind, I decide to just go all in. It gets around to the player that 3-bet to 45. He thinks for about 30 seconds, eventually calls. He has to flip over his cards before the flop, and I agree. He's got ace-queen. I have kings. He has ace-queen of clubs. I'm in a good spot headed to the run out. If he doesn't hit an ace or clubs, I'm good. The board comes out 7, 8, 9 of clubs. A disastrous flop for me. He flops the nut flush, which makes me dead at this point unless it comes king. The turn is the deuce of spades. That kills my odds. The 4 of clubs comes on the river, and we have to pay off our opponent. He's got 147 in chips. We pay him off, and we have to rebuy. That's the luck element of poker. You're not going to always win when you're a big favorite pre-flop. Would you have pushed all in on the flop? We have pocket jacks in middle position. It gets raised to 10 in front of us. I 3-bet to 35. I only have about 110 to start the hand, so we have 75 behind now. The player behind me calls. The original raiser calls. We're going 3 ways to the flop. There's 110 in the middle, and I have 70 behind. The flop comes king 5 deuce rainbow. First player checks. I probably should have gone all in here. The flop was actually pretty good for me, but I decided to check because I wanted to see one more card. The player behind me also checks. We go to the turn. The turn is the 3 of diamonds. Now I feel more comfortable with another undercard putting all my chips in. So I go all in on the turn. The player behind me thinks for a little bit, eventually decides to fold, but the other player comes along and calls my all in. No more action. The 5 of hearts comes on the river. I flip over pocket jacks. My opponent has pocket 9s he showed, and we win a nice all-in pot. Did I play this hand correctly? We're on the button with 9-10 of spades. We love suited connectors in cash games. It gets raised to 15 in middle position. There's a caller in front of me. I call. Another player calls. We're going 4 ways. There's 63 in the middle. The flop comes 9-7-3 with 3 hearts. We flop top pair. There's 3 hearts on board. Everybody checks. We're last to act because we're on the button. I decide to bet 30, a half pot size bet. People could have hearts on a draw. I want them to call because I have top pair. We only get 1 player to call. The turn card comes out, the deuce of spades. He checks. Now, I decide to bet 55, upping the price to call if he wants to continue with his draw. But after thinking, he folds his cards, and we take down the pot with top pair. Nice hand for us. It's a straddle pot, and we got pocket kings in late position. I raise it to 25. It gets around to the straddler who calls. We're going heads up to a flop. This is a 1-3 no limit game. The flop comes jack 8-3 rainbow. That's a really good flop for us. Because he didn't 3-bet us, there's no way he has aces. He might have ace jack or a hand like that because he bets out for 20 on the flop. Because he bet at a turn, I decide to just call with my kings just to see how he reacts on the turn. The turn is another 8, this time the 8 of clubs. He bets another 20. And because he might have an 8 possibly, I decide to just smooth call on the turn. The river comes the queen of clubs. I have an overpair to the board, kings and 8s, 2 pair. He bets for 40, and I decide to throw in a small raise to 85 because I have to raise at some point with my hand. If he has an 8, he has an 8, but most likely we have the winning hand here, so I make it 85 to try to get some value, but my opponent folds his cards, and we win a pot with pocket kings. After winning a couple pots, I now have pocket 6s in middle position. The player in front of me raises to 7. I call. 3 other players call, including the blinds and the button. We're going 5 ways to the flop. I have the second best position. The flop comes 6-7 ace, and it's rainbow. We flop bottom set. The blinds check. The original razor pre-flop checks. I bet 25. This is a really good board for us because we flopped a set. There's an ace on board and most likely someone called pre-flop with an ace. Yet we start to receive a bunch of bad news. The button folds, the blinds fold, the original razor folds. We get no action after flopping a set. You hate to see it. Bad beats are just a part of the game. I'm in the big blind with ace-king offsuit. Everybody folds. It gets around to the button who makes it 12. He's only got about $100 behind. I 3-bet to 35, and he instantly shoves all his chips in the middle. He goes all in for 100. Obviously, I'm not folding. I make the call. A little bit of table talk goes on. I want to show my cards, but he doesn't. We go to the board. The board's queen 7-4 with 3 diamonds. Now I have 2 overcards, and I have the nut diamond if another one comes out. The turn is the jack of spades. The river's the 4 of clubs. He flips over ace-queen. I had him absolutely dominated pre-flop. Ace-king against ace-queen. But he flopped a queen. We lose the pot, and I got to pay him off 100.
Why are you mad? You got it in here.
I had just taken a break, so I had to put $3 in the hand pre-flop. We see pocket sixes. It gets around to me, and I decide to raise to 8. I'm trying to build the pot. In case I flop a set, I want some money in there. 3 other players end up calling the 8. We're going to a flop 4 ways. The flop comes 8-8-4. Pretty good flop for us. The first player decides to bet 5. The next guy folds. And I raise to 20 to see where the guy's at. When someone bets 5 at a turn, they either have a big draw or they flopped an 8. The player behind folds. We're going heads up to the turn. He makes the call for 20. The turn card is the 5 of spades. We now make a gut shot straight draw. And there's 2 spades and 2 hearts on the board now. He bets 15 on the turn. I'm priced in to call at this point. Even if he's ahead, I could hit a 7. I could hit a 6. I have outs to win the pot. The river card comes the ace of spades. Backdoor spades gets there. He bets 25, making the price too good to call again. I call for 25, and he shows 7-8. He flop trips, and we pay him off. Did I slow play this hand too much? We have king 4 of hearts in the small blind. It gets raised to 10. There's a caller. I call. The big blind calls as well. We're going 4 ways to a flop. It's a dream flop for us. King, king 9. We flop trips, and it's a rainbow board. I check. Everybody else checks. We're going to a turn card. The turn is the ace of diamonds. I decide to check again because there's 3 other players in the hand, and the turn's an ace, and hopefully someone has an ace, and I'm praying that they're going to bet. It gets to the last player to act, and he bets 25 on the turn. I call the 25, obviously. I didn't raise there. I probably should have raised on the turn, but I decide to flat call the 25, and the other 2 players fold. The river card comes the queen of hearts. I check again. He bets 45. I snap call. He shows 8-10 of diamonds for a missed flush draw. I had trip kings, and I take down the pot. Did I play this too lightly? Should I have raised there on the turn of the river? One of my favorite hands in the small blind, we got pocket 5s. There's 2 limpers in front of me. I make it 10 to go, trying to build the pot in case I hit a set. We get 3 players to call. We're going 4 ways to a flop. There's 40 in the middle. And we do flop that set. The board comes 5, 9, 10. 2 spades out there with a flush draw. We bet $20, half pot size bet, trying to keep people in. The player behind me folds, and the next guy goes all in. We get shoved into with a set. How good is that? He's got about only $80. That's why he went all in. The other player folds. We call pretty quickly, obviously. I throw my cards over. I got a set. He flips over. He's got a flush draw. He has a naked flush draw. 3, 6 of spades. The board comes the ace of clubs, the three of hearts. We dodge a bullet with the flush draw, and we take down a pot, and we bust a player. This family pot ended up not being so friendly. We have king 7 of diamonds. We limped along with everybody else, $2 to the flop. The flop is 3, 5, 8 with 2 diamonds. We flop the second nut flush draw. It gets checked to me. I bet 10. The player behind me instantly makes it 25 bucks to go and only has about $50 more than that. It gets back around to me. I raise the other player all in with the flush draw. I know he's not calling, but I'm not going anywhere either with this amount of money. So I decide to just get the money all in on the flop. We head to a run out, and we don't make the flush. It's the 10 of hearts, the deuce of spades. Our opponent flopped an absolute monster with top pair and the queen high flush draw. And our opponent wins the pot with a pair of 8s. Bluffing in low stakes could be very risky. We have deuce 4 of spades. Somebody raised to 15. Another player calls, and I 3-bet, getting crazy up to 40. The reason I did it is because I most likely had position being second last behind the button, but we lose that position when the button calls and the other 2 players come along as well, which I didn't expect. I was trying to isolate one, but we're going 4 ways to a flop, $160 in the middle in a 1-2 no limit game. The flop comes deuce 6 queen rainbow. We flop bottom pair, but that's not enough for me to continue on the flop. I check, everybody else checks. We're going to the turn. The turn is the 3 of diamonds, doesn't change much. If these players called with high cards or even middling cards, they're not going to come along, so I decided to bet 50 on the turn to bluff at this pot. Everybody folds their cards. I flip over the deuce 4 for a bluff, and we take down a nice pot in 1-2. This was one of the weirder hands I've ever played. Everybody starts limping. We have king-queen offsuit in the big blind. It gets around to us. I make it 25 out of position. I don't want to play my hand against that many players, but it's still a good hand. The player behind me goes all in for $48, and 2 other players call. Everybody limped originally, and then they put $48. This doesn't make any sense to me. It gets around to me. I have to call, obviously, for 23 more. We're going 4 ways to a flop. 1 player's all in. The flop comes out ace jack 8 with 2 spades. We flop a gut shot with a 10. I check, hoping everybody's going to just check it down unless they have something big, which they do. They keep checking. The turn is the 4 of clubs. We all check again. The river is the queen of hearts, and everybody checks again. I have a queen, but the player who went all in has ace 5 off. I guess they all called with nothing, $48 pre, but that hand was just flat out weird. Would you have called the bet on the river? We have king-queen offsuit, middle position. I raise to 10. 3 players call the 10. We're going to the flop 4 ways. And it's a good flop for me. It's 10 jack 5 with 2 clubs. We flop an open-ended straight draw. Any 9, any ace makes us a straight. We also have 2 overcards. First player checks. I bet 20. The player behind me calls my $20 bet. And then the other player announces raise. He throws 20 in, and then he throws 50 more. Now, I'm tempted to call here because if I hit my ace or my 9, I could get paid, and if I also hit a king or a queen, I might be in the lead as well. So I call, and the player behind me also calls, which is good for me. The turn card comes, the king of hearts, and the player who raised on the flop announces check before even seeing it. I check as well. The other player checks. We're headed to a river. I probably should have went all in on the turn to get the flush draw out of there potentially after hitting the king, but I ended up checking along with everybody else. The river card comes the 4 of clubs. The flush gets there, and the player who raised on the turn bets out for 100 on the river. At this point, I don't think my hand could be good. There's also a player behind me, so I decided to fold. The other player folds, and we don't get to see anybody's cards. Do you think I should have called on the river? Was my hand good? Did I not bet enough pre-flop? We got pocket queens in middle position. I make it 15 in a 1-2 game, and 5 other players come along for 15. We're going 6 ways to the flop with 75 in the middle. It's a good flop for us. It comes 10-4 deuce with 2 diamonds. We even overpair to this board. It gets checked to me. I bet 35, and all 5 of the players that called pre-flop, none of them hit any piece of it, and they all fold. It's kind of crazy. They all called for 15, and no one hits a piece of it. But we'll take it. We win the pot with an overpair after being scared playing this hand against 5 other players.